The sun sagged low in the sky, casting long, crooked shadows across the empty countryside road. The motorcycle rumbled along, kicking up dust behind it as Cole tightened his grip on the handlebars. His leather jacket, cracked and faded from years of rough living, snapped in the cool wind. Seated behind him was a small figure, barely tall enough for her feet to reach the sides of the bike. Emily clung to him with uncertain hands, her thin jacket doing little against the creeping chill. She had trusted him. When her shoe had broken walking home from the community park, and she'd found herself stranded far from town, it had seemed like a blessing when Cole offered her a ride. His voice had been rough but not unfriendly. His beard covered most of his face, hiding any real expression. To Emily, he had seemed like a traveling cowboy, someone who might tell stories and bring her safely home. She hadn't noticed how his eyes stayed too long on the empty fields or how he avoided the main roads. The farther they traveled, the more uneasy Emily became. The landmarks she recognized began to vanish, replaced by towering trees and endless dirt paths. Her hands, small and cold, gripped tighter around Cole's waist. She wanted to ask where they were going, but fear clogged her throat. Suddenly, Cole slowed the bike. He steered off the paved road onto a rougher trail, the tires crunching over loose stones. Trees loomed on either side like silent giants. Emily's heart started hammering in her chest. Something was wrong. Very wrong. They reached a small clearing where the ground was cracked and muddy, the sky above bruised purple with oncoming night. Without a word, Cole cut the engine. The sudden silence pressed hard against Emily's ears. She looked up at him, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but he swung a heavy leg off the bike and pointed at the ground. "Off," he said, his voice low and hard. Emily hesitated. Her instincts screamed for her to stay on the bike, to hold tight and refuse. But she was just a child, and adults were supposed to know best. She slid down, her sneakers sinking into the soft dirt. Cole didn't wait. Before she could ask a single question, he climbed back onto the bike, kicked it into roaring life, and turned away. Emily watched, stunned, as the red taillight grew smaller and smaller, until it blinked out entirely among the trees. And just like that, she was alone. Emily stood frozen in the middle of the clearing, the fading roar of the motorcycle still ringing in her ears. She blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her mind screamed that this had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe Cole had turned around, maybe he was just going to the other side of the clearing to get something. But as the minutes dragged on, that hope began to fade like the last light of day. The cold began to seep through her thin jacket, biting at her skin. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself, the knot of dread in her stomach growing tighter with every passing second. She tried to call out, but her voice felt small and lost in the vast emptiness of the woods. "Cole," she whispered, almost pleading. But no answer came, only the whisper of wind through the trees. Emily's eyes scanned the trees around her, trying to figure out which direction to go, but everything looked the same. The forest, thick with overgrown branches and tangled underbrush, stretched on endlessly in every direction. There were no familiar roads, no signs of life, no houses or people, just trees. Her breath quickened, and panic started to rise in her chest. She had no idea where she was. Her small legs ached from the long ride, and now they felt like they might give out from under her. She had no choice but to move. She took a few hesitant steps forward, glancing behind her, but Cole was gone. It was as if the world had swallowed him whole. The forest felt alive now, as though the shadows were watching her. She swallowed hard, trying to push down the rising tide of fear. "Keep moving," she whispered to herself, though she wasn't sure why. Where would she even go? As if on cue, the wind shifted, carrying with it a sharp, wild scent. Her breath caught in her throat. Something was wrong. Her pulse raced, and her eyes darted around again, searching the edges of the trees. That's when she saw them. A pair of eyes, glowing faintly in the gathering dusk. Then another pair, and another. Slowly, they emerged from the darkness, creeping toward her with deliberate slowness. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The wolves. They were taller than she had imagined, their fur thick and matted from the winter months. Their eyes glinted in the low light, a fierce yellow that sent a chill through her entire body. They didn't make a sound as they moved closer, their paws silent on the soft ground. Emily's breath hitched. She was alone, and she was prey. Emily's heart hammered in her chest as she stood perfectly still, her wide eyes locked on the wolves closing in around her. The fading daylight barely filtered through the thick canopy of trees, casting long, twisted shadows over the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the unmistakable musk of wild animals. Every breath felt sharp, every movement from the wolves sending ripples of dread through her entire body. Her legs trembled, threatening to collapse beneath her, but she forced herself to stand upright, knowing that running would be the worst possible choice. The wolves were too fast. They would catch her. Slowly, almost deliberately, they moved in closer. The largest of them, a dark figure with matted fur and eyes that glowed like embers, was the first to take a step forward. Emily could hear its low growl rumbling from deep within its chest, a sound that sent a spike of terror straight into her spine. The other wolves followed, their eyes never leaving her. They circled her with a predator's patience, inching closer with every passing second. Their movements were graceful, almost hypnotic. They had done this before. They knew how to stalk, how to wait for the right moment. Emily's breath was shallow now, her throat dry, and the feeling of helplessness pressed down on her like a heavy weight. She tried to swallow, but her mouth felt as dry as the ground beneath her. She glanced around frantically, but there was nowhere to go. The forest was thick and wild. No paths, no roads, no signs of life. The only thing that existed in the world at that moment were the wolves, closing in on her with each step. A chill ran down her spine, not from the cold, but from the realization of how alone she truly was. She had no parents here, no one to help. The faintest sound of a distant howl sent a shiver through her, and she knew, deep down, that the wolves were no longer just curious. They were hungry, and she was their prey. The ground seemed to shift under her feet as the wolves began to edge even closer. Their ears were pinned back, their teeth sharp and glistening in the dim light. Emily's thoughts raced. Was she going to die here? In the middle of nowhere? Was this how her story would end? Alone and helpless, surrounded by creatures that only saw her as food. Just as the first wolf made its move, lunging toward her with terrifying speed, a sudden, deafening roar shattered the silence of the forest. The wolves froze, their heads snapping toward the sound, their growls fading into tense, cautious silence. Emily stood frozen, her body rigid with terror, unable to move as the wolf lunged toward her. Its jaws were wide, sharp teeth gleaming in the dying light. But then, just as the wolf was about to strike, the ground beneath her feet rumbled, and a deafening roar sliced through the air, shaking the trees. The wolf stopped mid-stride, its fur bristling, its body tensing. Emily's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, like time itself had paused. The other wolves hesitated, their eyes flicking back and forth between Emily and the source of the roar. And then, out of the thick shadows at the edge of the clearing, a truck tore through the underbrush, its headlights blazing. The powerful growl of an engine shattered the oppressive silence, and the wolves scattered in an instant, retreating into the darkness like shadows. Emily's wide eyes were fixed on the truck as it skidded to a halt, sending dirt and debris flying. The headlights blinded her for a moment, and she shielded her eyes with her arms. But as the truck's engine rumbled to a stop, the door flew open and a figure jumped out. The woman who emerged from the truck was tall and strong-looking, her boots crunching against the dry leaves beneath her feet as she ran toward Emily. Her coat was thick and heavy, and her face was set in a determined expression, framed by dark hair that whipped in the wind. She didn't hesitate for even a second as she reached Emily's side, her voice sharp but calm. "Get in the truck. Now." Emily didn't need to be told twice. She instinctively backed away from the now vacant clearing, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet as the wild wolves retreated deeper into the forest. The woman was already moving, her flashlight raised high, scanning the trees for any sign of danger. She kept her eyes on the forest edge, never letting down her guard. Emily hesitated for a brief moment, still in shock, but the woman's commanding voice broke through the fog of fear clouding her mind. She scrambled into the truck, her legs shaky from the terror that had gripped her. The woman was already in the driver's seat, turning the ignition and slamming the truck into gear. "Hold on," the woman muttered as the tires screeched against the dirt, pulling them swiftly away from the clearing. Emily clung to the edge of the seat, her breath coming in shallow bursts as she looked out the rearview mirror, half expecting the wolves to reappear. But the forest was silent now, the only sound the truck's engine rumbling as they sped away from the nightmare that had almost claimed her life. As the truck raced down the winding dirt road, Emily finally found her voice, her words barely above a whisper. Who are you?" The woman's gaze was firm on the road ahead, but her lips curled into a small, reassuring smile. "Name's June, and you're safe now." The truck rumbled through the dense forest, its tires kicking up dirt and gravel as June expertly navigated the winding path. Emily's hands trembled in her lap, still trying to process everything that had happened. The world outside the truck's windows was a blur of trees, shadows, and the fading light of dusk. She wanted to look out to see where they were going, but her mind kept drifting back to the terrifying circle of wolves that had surrounded her just moments ago. Are they gone?" Emily finally whispered, her voice barely a breath. June's grip tightened on the steering wheel, her eyes locked on the winding road ahead. She didn't glance over at Emily, but her voice was steady, though there was a hint of urgency in it. "They're gone for now. Wolves like that won't stick around long, especially after a disturbance." The words were meant to reassure, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling of unease gnawing at her. She wasn't sure what June meant by disturbance, but all she could think about was the way those wolves had moved, silent, calculating, ready to strike. What would have happened if the truck hadn't appeared? Her thoughts were interrupted by the low growl of a distant engine. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible beneath the roar of the truck, but it grew louder with each passing second. Emily's heart skipped. The sound wasn't the steady hum of the truck's engine. It was something else. Something more powerful, more dangerous. June's eyes flickered to the rearview mirror, narrowing as she saw the headlights drawing closer. The growl of the engine was now unmistakable. Someone, or something, was behind them. "Stay down," June muttered, her voice hard as she slammed the truck into a higher gear. She pressed the accelerator, and the truck shot forward, kicking up even more dirt behind them. Emily's pulse quickened. She didn't need to be told twice. She sank low in her seat, trying to make herself as small as possible, her chest tight with fear. Her heart raced, and the air felt suddenly thick with tension. The headlights in the rearview mirror were getting closer, and fast. A flash of red, a motorcycle, appeared in the distance, cutting through the trees, the figure riding it familiar. It was Cole. He was back, and he wasn't alone. Two more motorcycles followed, their engines roaring in the thick night air. Emily's stomach dropped. What did he want now? Why had he come back? The headlights of the bikes gleamed ominously as they gained ground, getting dangerously close. June swore under her breath, her foot pressing harder on the gas pedal. "Hold on, kid," she said, her voice barely a whisper over the deafening roar of the engines. "We've got trouble." Emily's grip on the seat tightened as the truck lurched forward, racing through the trees. The sound of the motorcycles behind them grew louder and louder, the air heavy with the promise of danger. They were closing in. And then, as if to answer the challenge, June slammed the truck into a sharp turn, veering off the main road and onto a rugged trail, the tires skidding wildly beneath them. The truck's tires screeched as June turned sharply onto a narrow dirt trail, the headlights bouncing erratically over the rough terrain. The motorcycles were still behind them, cutting through the trees with frightening speed. Emily could hear the roar of their engines growing louder, their pursuit relentless. Please get away," Emily whispered under her breath, her fingers digging into the seat as if her grip alone could make the truck move faster. Her heart pounded in her chest, fear and adrenaline blending into a haze of panic. She had never been so terrified in her life. June's face remained set, her jaw clenched in determination. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. It was as though the danger surrounding them was something she had faced 100 times before. But Emily wasn't sure how anyone could handle something like this. The motorcycles were gaining on them. The roar of their engines filled the air like thunder, and every time Emily glanced in the rearview mirror, she saw them getting closer. The leader, the one with the unmistakable leather vest and a beard that matched the one she had seen before, was riding right behind them now. His cold, determined eyes were locked on the truck, and Emily could feel the danger radiating off of him. "Stay low." June's voice was low but steady as she shot a quick glance at Emily. She knew the kid was scared, and the woman's protective instinct flared. This isn't over yet. June slammed the truck into a sharp turn, the vehicle jerking as it bounced over uneven ground. Emily barely managed to hold on, her stomach lurching as the truck careened down the trail. Trees blurred by the windows, and every bump in the road felt like it could send them flying off course. In the rearview mirror, Emily saw the first motorcycle break away from the others and attempt to cut them off. The biker's face twisted with anger as he revved his engine and surged ahead. He was fast, too fast. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Just as the motorcycle closed in on them, June slammed the wheel to the left again, sending the truck into a tight, hair-raising spin. The tires screeched, the truck groaning with the sudden shift, but June held it steady. The motorcycle shot past them, missing the truck by mere inches. Emily gasped, her heart in her throat. They were going to make it, but then another motorcycle appeared, blocking the trail ahead of them, a dark figure riding toward them with deadly intent. "Not this time," June muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing as she searched the road ahead. With a sharp turn, June drove the truck up a steep incline, narrowly avoiding the biker that now tailed them. Emily's stomach lurched again, the sudden incline making her feel as though they were about to tip over. But June didn't slow down. She pushed the truck forward with a raw, powerful determination. In the rearview mirror, Emily saw the figure of the last motorcycle drop back as the truck shot forward, gaining speed. The biker's face twisted in frustration, and for a moment, Emily thought they had escaped. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. The truck barreled down the winding trail, its engine roaring, every bump and turn jarring Emily's body as she clung to the seat. The headlights illuminated nothing but the wild, darkened trees that surrounded them. Emily's breath came in shallow gasps, her mind racing. The motorcycles were still behind them, but now, with the last one falling further back, she thought, just maybe, they were going to get away. But just as that thought flickered in her mind, a chilling howl split the night air. The noise was unnatural, raw, and primal, and it echoed from the trees ahead. Emily's stomach twisted. It wasn't a wolf this time. It was something else, something far more menacing. June's face tightened, her eyes scanning the road ahead as her foot slammed harder on the gas. "Hold on tight," she warned again, her voice filled with urgency. "It's not over." In the rearview mirror, Emily saw the first motorcycle closing in once more. The rider had managed to catch up after the sharp turn and was now roaring toward them, his face dark with anger. But it wasn't just one biker this time. The other two had regrouped, and they were right behind him. They weren't going to stop. And then Emily saw it, the thing that made her blood run cold. A shape, massive and dark, appeared in the trees ahead. At first, it seemed like just another shadow, but as they neared, the figure stepped into the beam of the truck's headlights. It was tall, hunched, and far too large to be any animal Emily had ever seen. The shape of it was almost human-like, but its features were distorted, covered in thick, matted fur that glinted in the dim light. Its eyes, cold and yellow, gleamed with a hungry intensity as it stood, watching them approach. June didn't slow down. She slammed the wheel to the left, trying to steer the truck away, but the figure lunged forward, a massive arm sweeping out to strike. Emily screamed as the truck veered dangerously, but June held control, the tires screeching as they skidded along the muddy path. Another roar split the air, a different sound, fiercer, deeper. It came from the pack of wolves that had been following them. They had emerged from the trees again, their glowing eyes fixing on the truck, and now they weren't just circling, they were charging. June swore under her breath. "They've got backup," she muttered, her hands tightening on the wheel. She glanced at Emily, her expression unreadable. "Get ready." Before Emily could respond, the first motorcycle caught up with them, the rider swerving dangerously close, aiming to push them off the road. June reacted instinctively, throwing the truck into a hard left turn, sending it skidding and then jolting back onto the narrow trail. Emily's body slammed against the door, her head spinning. Then, a loud crash echoed in the distance, an impact so sharp and sudden it made the forests seem to tremble. Emily's heart skipped. A deep growl rose from the trees, and she looked back to see the monstrous figure in the shadows, charging at the motorcycles. The wolves were no longer just in pursuit. They were attacking. With incredible speed, they descended on the bikers, their jaws snapping and claws slashing through the air. Chaos erupted behind them. June didn't look back. She only pressed harder on the gas, the truck roaring forward as the sounds of snarling wolves and revving engines faded into the night. The monstrous figure remained in the trees, watching as the last of the motorcycles was swallowed by the darkness. Emily's mind was racing, her heart still in her throat. What had just happened? The attack from the wolves, the strange creature, and the bikers. All of it seemed unreal. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. "We're not safe yet," June said, her voice steady but laced with tension. She kept her eyes on the road ahead, determination etched into her features. "But we'll get there." The truck raced through the dense forest, the sound of its engine the only thing breaking the heavy silence. The night seemed to stretch on endlessly, the shadows of trees closing in around them. But for the first time in what felt like hours, Emily could hear nothing but the rhythmic hum of the vehicle's tires on the dirt road. The roar of motorcycles and the growls of wolves had faded into the distance, but Emily's mind was still racing. Her breath was shallow, her hands trembling in her lap as she stared out the window. The dark forest outside seemed endless, like it had swallowed them whole. She couldn't quite wrap her mind around everything that had just happened. The wolves, the monstrous figure, the bikers, the chase, and how June had somehow kept them alive. After what felt like an eternity, June finally slowed the truck. The engine's roar softened as they approached a small, secluded cabin nestled in the trees, its lights flickering softly in the distance. It was nothing like the dark, open wilderness they'd just fled. There was a strange calm here, a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind. June brought the truck to a stop, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Emily's heart was still pounding in her chest, but the adrenaline was beginning to wear off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. She could feel her muscles aching, her entire body feeling like it had just fought a battle she hadn't been prepared for. "Are we safe?" Emily asked quietly, her voice hoarse from the fear that had gripped her. June didn't answer immediately. Instead, she shifted the truck into park and killed the engine. The silence was almost suffocating as they both sat there for a moment, the only sound the wind rustling through the trees. Finally, June turned to face her, her expression serious but not unkind. "For now," she said simply. "But we need to stay alert. There's always more in the woods. And those bikers? They're not going to stop. They'll be back." Emily nodded, the weight of those words settling heavily in her chest. She wanted to ask so many things: why June had been there, what those creatures were, why Cole had left her behind. But she couldn't form the words. Her mind was too full, too exhausted. June opened the door, stepping out of the truck and into the cool night air. Emily hesitated for a moment before following, her legs unsteady as she climbed out of the vehicle. The cabin was small but sturdy, the lights inside flickering in a warm, inviting glow. June moved toward the door, pausing to look back at Emily. "Stay close," she said. "This isn't over yet." As they entered the cabin, Emily couldn't shake the image of the wolves, the monstrous figure, and the bikers chasing them. It felt like a nightmare that might never end. But for now, at least, she was safe. At least she had someone looking out for her. Emily swallowed hard, trying to push the fear from her mind. There was no telling what tomorrow might bring, but tonight, she was alive, and that had to be enough.